Hello everybody! Something different from me today. I hope I can make this a bit of a regular thing. I have been known amongst friends and family to be a baker by name and reputation. And I am from Saxony, and Saxony in Germany, it's a region in Germany, is very famous for its cakes. Now they say there are more cake recipes in Saxony alone than in the whole of Germany combined, I don't know. But there are certainly a lot of them. And my grandmother taught me baking from a very young age. And I just take it for granted. And I've made a lot of cakes, Saxon cakes over the years here in New Zealand, and I brought back a lot of the ingredients, and most of the ingredients you can buy now in New Zealand. So it kind of makes sense to try and make a little bit of a, I don't know, a little recipe blog or even a little cookbook with Saxon recipes, not just cakes. There are some savory things in there, lunch dishes, dinner dishes, that sort of thing, but we're starting with cakes. And the one thing I just take for granted is a yeast dough. Now a yeast dough is essentially, it's the base for, I would say, about 40% of Saxon cakes. You have the yeast base, and then you fill it with all sorts of other things, and yeah, it's one of the basics. And there are three main variations of this, and every family has their own on top of it. So there are three different variations of this yeast dough, and I'm making variation number 1 today. Now, I'm lucky. I still have, my family sends me these and I bring them back when I go on holiday. It won't happen this year because of COVID-19. But so I still got these packs of, here we go. Hefe is the German word for yeast. So I still got these pre-packs, and they always 7 grams, always for 500 grams of flour. Now whatever the equivalent is in New Zealand, you have to look up on the pack of the yeast that the baker's yeast that you buy in the shops. However much you need to use for 500 grams of flour, that's the measurement you use. I use one of these packs for 500, and that's 7 grams of yeast, so it probably is around about that kind of mark. And the other thing I always use, bring back but make my own as well, is vanilla sugar. There you go. Zucker is the German word for sugar, but I also make my own. There you go. That's raw sugar and just a couple of vanilla beans stuck in it, and basically they do their thing. They infuse the sugar with their flavor, and that's the trick. And that's a big jar versus little packs like this, or little jars that you can buy in the shop, so it goes a long way. The other thing you can use instead of vanilla sugar is your bog standard vanilla paste. I personally don't like, those sort of flavorings. Take the real thing, really. So those are the main things that may be different from what you can buy in your shops. All the other ingredients, the flour, the sugar, milk, you can buy just normal shops. We use a lot of margarine in German Saxon baking. You need to pick the kind that allows you to use for baking, and so there are some that may not be good for it, so stay away from those. Alternatively, you can use butter. Just use a little less. If the recipe calls for whatever 200 grams of margarine, maybe use 150 butter, just because the fat content otherwise might be too high. So let's just dive into it, and I'll show you how I make this. Hi dear, welcome back. So, here we go. Got a big bowl, put it on our scale, wait till it's on 0. I mean, I've done this before. as they always show on, on your TV screens. So now we need flour, sieve, and then I've got 500 grams of flour in here, and it needs to be sieved. Here you go. So what it does is get rid of any lumps, makes it nice and soft, but also gets a bit of extra air in here. You know, back in the day, flour wasn't quite as pure as we know it today, and so the stuffing is kind of, or if you make your own flour, you might still have some bits in there that you don't want in your cake, so this gets rid of them. Go. You don't have to do it, but I don't know, I've just been taught to always do it that way, so it's one of those things. Right, so that's what we're doing now. Here we go. So the next thing, if we're working with fresh yeast, it's a slightly different process, but because fresh yeast is kind of hard to get in New Zealand unless you know where to look for it, we're working with dried. So what we do next is we make a little well on one side of it. Right, you see that? Here you go. Little hole here. That's where we put our yeast. Right. The other thing we put there is our vanilla sugar or vanilla paste. Or you can alternatively, if you don't want to use vanilla at all, and you want to give your cake a little bit of a sangy kind of texture, you can also use lemon zest. It goes really well. Or even better is bitter almonds. Now bitter almonds are even in Europe, I think these days you have to go to the pharmacy to get them because, of course they in large quantities are poisonous. But if you get them, or the bitter almond flavoring, yep, use it by all means. The other thing we also need is a pinch of salt. Really, just that much. And then we need to heat our milk. Now, milk is always a bit of a tricky one. This recipe normally calls for 250 or quarter of a litre of milk. Warm milk, sort of hand warm, 38 degrees kind of thing. So I just use a regular old jug, measure it, and pop it in the microwave. That always works a trick. So we're gonna go and heat that one up now. So there's our milk. It's hand warm. And we don't use all of it right away because that would fill up. Yeah, sometimes you need less. It's just one of those things. And we put that in here, in that little bowl that we made. Right? And then you could use some, spatula. But I always thought the best tool in the house is your hand. And just give it a bit of a mix. Now, the little bit of sugar that's in here, that vanilla sugar that we put in, right? That will help, that will give the yeast, it's basically the yeast feeds off the sugar. Not just of the actual sugar, but also of the sugars that is in the flour. It becomes a bit thick, so we put a little bit more in. Make it a nice little sort of thick paste, so to speak. Incorporate some of the flour, but not all of it yet. Right. There you go. A little bit of flour on top. And then what we do now is we basically just cover it with a tea towel and put it in a warm place. In summer, that could be just a sunny spot. It's sort of autumn now, almost winter. So what I do is I preheat the oven to just about 50 degrees and put it in there. And I check on it. It could be just 15 minutes, sometimes half an hour. When I see kind of lots of bubbles and this has risen a little bit, that's when I take it out for the next step. So this is our pre-dough, so to speak. Here you go. Nice and bubbly. So now what we need to do is put the margarine in. It's been done in the microwave. So it's liquid. Right. And possibly a little bit of the milk that is still warm or rewarmed. And then you can either use a spatula or you can use your hands and see how it kind of deflates. And it smells a bit sour. A little bit like sourdough, really. And mix this all together until you have a nice dough. You don't want it too moist, but you want enough moisture in there that when you put it back in its warm spot, that the yeast has enough food to expand. Just a tiny little bit more. Go. And use your hands. Nice smooth dough. See, it's coming away from the sides of the bowl. So now it needs to prove again. And so what you do is you put a little bit of flour in the base of your bowl and a little bit on top. Cover it again with a tea towel, put it in a warm place, like I've got a sunny space here, or put it back in the oven, maximum 50 degrees really. You want it really just sort of nice, a little bit more than room temp. For probably another 30-40 minutes, up to an hour depending. It will sort of kind of fill up this whole bowl. Rightio, welcome back. Have a look at this. So you can see it's nicely expanded. And so I think the professional term is knocking it back or knocking it down. So basically you just deflate it. So you do that, and then you knead it again. And then you roll it out. I can't do that here because I've got the tablecloth on here and the camera setting on the light, but I'm sure you know how to roll out a dough. And then what you do next is you use your baking tray and you put a bit of, I use margarine, you know, just sort of cover it so it's got a non-greasy, or rather sorry, a non-stick kind of surface where the cake can rise. Put it in, put your filling in, whatever that may be. I mean, this kind of yeast dough, you can also half it and use it, if you use a little bit of less sugar, you can use it for pizza, for example, as a pizza dough, or you can make all sorts of other cakes out of it. You can even freeze it. If you know, make it into little balls, you can put it in the freezer, and then when you take it out, just need to let it rise again and knock it down a little bit. But other than that, this is your basic yeast dough. And you know, it's you know, that's 500 grams of flour. It's a decent size. You know, I probably use half for this cake because I don't want the base too thick, and I probably will freeze the rest. So that's the base of most, clearly not all, but of most sort of Saxon cakes that I make as a yeast dough. So just so you know.